The Portland Fire, the new expansion team of. Hold on, sorry. I'm
You're
just
good.
gonna
You're good.
keep
You're good.
I'll just put this part out. The Portland Fire, the new expansion team of the WNBA, accidentally revealed their head coach hire through a LinkedIn post.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Kalia Butler, the sideline reporter for the Chicago Sky. And today we have plenty to talk about per usual. There was a record WNBA playoff ratings that just came out, as well as our WNBA hot takes. And of course, I can't do all of this alone. Joined alongside me is Sophia Jones, the radio analyst for the other expansion team this season, the Golden State Valkyries. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, this isn't the first time we've actually seen the Portland team mistakenly post something and take it back and delete it and act like it never happened. So I can't tell if they're trying to just like tease certain things about this new team. But again, Portland Fire is going to be the newest WNBA expansion team, along with the Toronto Tempo that is coming along as well. But they accidentally revealed that the head coach hire is going to be Alex Sarama. Sophia, I know you have plenty of background information on him. Tell us a little bit about who this new head coach is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, first off, the accident post on LinkedIn of all social media platforms was definitely kind of an interesting one to me. But Sarama, he was assistant coach and head of player development for the Cleveland Cavaliers last season in the NBA. He also has experience and ties to the city of Portland, where he was an assistant coach for their G League team there, the Rip City Remix. But this kind of all ties in because he worked with the Portland Fire GM in England, yeah, in England with the London Lions, so in the British Basketball League, and kind of really revolutionized that team and got them to prominence. But so he's been around for a bit. He has a very unique coaching style, and I think that is probably what drew him or drew Vanya, the GM, to wanting to hire him the most for this team. He kind of revolutionized or is a key just facilitator of this movement called constraints led approach, or CLA. And I was reading about it. It's really interesting. It's very scientific, but essentially it's a learning method that has made its way from academia to the mainstream, drawing from innovative research in psychology and neuroscience. It replaces traditional block training, where an athlete learns single movement patterns step by step, with game like situations that feature special rules, forcing them to adapt their moves on the fly. And it's founded on the principle that training perfectly yields imperfect results. So I think for this hire, Sarama, he's very player development and offensively minded. It makes sense for an expansion team when you're not just thinking about how you're going to fare that very first season. I mean, not everyone can have as historical of a debut as the Golden State Valkyries, but it definitely makes sense for that long run and getting a core group of players that can then grow with the franchise.
Yeah, and to your point with this constraints-led approach, very scientific, as you mentioned, and honestly really cool. Nothing that I had heard of until I had started reading the Athletic article about it and seeing how he was kind of the proponent of utilizing this, and obviously a very player development heavy coach. But one of the examples that was provided was Kelsey Plum, who uses the methodology to train. So in one drill, she was trapped at half court by two men twice her size and given 5 seconds to score. If she scored, she got 1 point. If she didn't, the defenders got 3 points, and first to 7 wins. This is also something that Victor Wembanyama has utilized as well. So we're seeing some of the top athletes in their own respective leagues, the WNBA and the MNBA, utilizing this sort of practice. So it's really cool to see him, Sarama, come in and, again, what we are now assuming he will be the head coach, just accidentally released.
Yes.
Uh,
This is all alleged.
Yes, alleged, rumored to be the head coach now. There was a post, but again, but if he is the head coach, which we are going to assume based on that post that has now been deleted by them. This is really interesting because, as you mentioned, these expansion teams, a lot of it is going to be based on players that, because like when I think about the Valkyries, there are some fantastic players on that team, right? You have a Kayla Thornton, but you also have a lot of fresh faces or a lot of players that are getting their first opportunity to be in the league. When you think of a Kate Martin or a Veronica Burton, Kate Martin, obviously only in her second season. Veronica Burton, who, she had her struggles of being able to make it in the league or not, but had so much success this season. Even a Caitlin Chen, coming from UConn, a lot of just fresh players on that roster and fresh faces to the league in general, a lot of overseas players as well. So maybe this level of development and utilizing this CLA learning method can be key in kind of pushing this Portland team to have, we can't tell now, but maybe they could have the same success as the Valkyries when we're thinking about them utilizing this in training camp. And also a lot of the expansion draft rules are going to come down to this collective bargaining agreement as well. So the league can't set a date until a new collective bargaining agreement is in place for the expansion draft. So that could end up being delayed due to, the battle between the WNBPA and the WNBA. But this could actually benefit some of these new coaches that are coming in because it gives them a little bit more time to prepare. But again, you're not positive what your roster will look like. So if you come in with this approach and knowing that it has worked on other players within the league and in other leagues, they could be a really strong team this season.
They really could. And you brought up just the international facet of kind of what the WNBA is now, actually, but just the most recent expansion team in the Valkyries. Their GM, she's from Europe. This new coach, he's English or British. So they're already going in an international route. And even with this CLA, the article is actually very interesting, but
Yeah. Everyone should read it, honestly.
yeah, it's very interesting. But it's talking about how it's not even just applied to basketball. The Los Angeles Dodgers used it for Shohei Ohtani. The Liverpool Premier League football club used it for their goalkeeper. So it's kind of making its waves. But with Coach Alex's experience with the Cleveland Cavaliers, he was on that staff with Kenny Atkinson, who won Coach of the Year. And Coach of the Year is kind of just an extension of coaching staff of the year. And that Cleveland Cavaliers team had the best offensive rating in the NBA. And I think a lot of that you can look towards this CLA, the constraints-led approach. And for an example, kind of in not necessarily player development, but in a team development sense, Atkinson and Sarama would have established principles of play that their players must adhere to, but rather than a rigid offensive system like X's and O's. So the trick was to build a shared understanding of how to identify the right affordances to exploit, refining the chaos. And it's very situational. In that one Kelsey Plum drill that we mentioned before, I mean, that's exactly what basketball is. And you watch Kelsey Plum play, and it's like, how does she manage to just get to the paint every single possession, it feels like, when the ball's in her hand? It's because she's doing drills kind of like this, and she spoke so highly of the training method. So it could definitely be something where this WNBA season, we don't know what to expect from it, with at least having a solid groundwork in how you're going to raise some of these players, I think can definitely be a solid start.
And you bring up two really key points there too, especially with Kelsey Plum, obviously a player in the WNBA that has utilized this method and it's been successful for her. When you think of it too, she's only 5'8". And when she's going against some of these incredibly tall players, when you have a 6'5", 6'7", somebody in the paint nowadays, this is really important for a player like her to be able to read and react, to understand how to, utilize her strengths in certain situations. So that's really cool just to see her development while utilizing this. But you also bring up the point about the success within coaching staffs as well. You saw this year, obviously, Natalie Nakase was able to win Coach of the Year, and this is her first season coaching in the WNBA. So we're seeing that these expansion teams are also getting NBA talent in terms of their coaches. They are selecting different coaches that have been able to coach at the NBA level. So very excited to see what this Portland team is going to bring. Again, we'll see how true some of these rumors are with the head coach, because it still was an accidental post. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the WNBA playoff ratings that have just come out right after this. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401k properties or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's all in one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy to use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization on your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Maximizing investments, increasing your savings rate, easily reviewing finances with your partner and or financial advisor, keeping a clear view of your financial health week to week and long term, etc. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNBA. Okay, so the most watched WNBA postseason ever on ESPN networks was this season. Across 24 games, the 2025 WNBA postseason averaged 1.2 million viewers, up 5%. The finals averaged 1.5 million viewers, which is only second on ESPN to the 2024 WNBA playoffs that were between the Lynx and the Liberty. A little bit of a breakdown. The finals, game 1 was 1.9 million viewers, game 2, 1.2, and game 3, 1.3. There's not a clear number on what game 4 looked like. However, many are speculating that because they have switched to, this best of 7 series, and the series only ended within 4 games. And after the first 1 or 2 games, it was pretty clear that the Aces were more than likely to sweep the Mercury, while last season came down to the wire between the Liberty and the Lynx. It was really high intensity, and game 5 was that must-win game to see who was going to win it all. So if the Mercury were able to put up a little bit more of a fight, and maybe could have had even larger numbers, but nonetheless, a fantastic postseason for the WNBA.
Definitely. It's very encouraging to see the growth of the game, and that it wasn't just last year, but also translated to this year. I mean, when you're looking at the full span of the WNBA postseason, just having all of those games combined break the record for most viewed on ESPN networks, because all the games were on ESPN. It's just so monumental, and it really goes to show the effort that all these women have been putting in towards putting the best product on the floor as possible and trying to win. And just with the finals, I mean, that game 1, 1.9, it was the most watched WNBA finals game 1 in 28 years. So that's a very long time, longer than I've been alive. So even both of us, yeah. So even just with you can look at that number, and you mentioned just the series last year between the Lynx and the Liberty. that was insane. I mean, you talk about going down to the wire and every single possession mattering. That is what that series really was. So a little bit this one, but to have the numbers still be comparable and have that be the second most watched, with game one being the first most watched, I think is still really, really positive.
And we have to give a credit to the big three of broadcasting, considering we are both broadcasters ourselves. Across 13 episodes, WNBA Countdown, presented by Google, averaged 437,000 viewers, which was up 30%. So when we're thinking of that big three, it's Shanae Gumke, Elle Duncan, and Andrea Carter, who have done a fantastic job all season long, covering these WNBA teams, covering the finals, being relatable, being funny. I love watching the big three and just their breakdowns of everything. Obviously, Shanae has been in these situations herself. She has a sister who was on the Seattle Storm, Madam President, and then obviously Andrea Carter, who unfortunately her career got cut short, but has such a eye for basketball and is so good at breaking down and analyzing literally every single player. It can anticipate what is going to be drawn up next. And then Elle Duncan just doing a great job at leading the conversation as well. So it's nice to see not only the success on the court, but people care to hear more about it. They're not just tuning into the games, watching it for a little bit, and then just being like, okay, cool. I have a general idea of what this game looks like or who's going to win. I'm just going to move on with my day. Making sure that you are tuning in for WNBA Countdown to just hear all the before the game stuff, staying for halftime, staying for maybe that post game analysis as well, but tuning in before the game to make sure that you are locked in and ready and you have the information that they are presenting you. That's also heartwarming to me because it shows that people really care to not only watch it, but also understand what is happening and what they can expect for the game.
No, definitely. I think that's a great point too, just considering that sometimes some of these games will say tip at or that starts at 7, but tip is actually at 7:15. So
Yes.
the fact that people are still tuning in for that pregame show, staying for maybe a little bit of a period before the actual game starts, and then watching the game, that type of just prolonged exposure is so good. I would even say that that ESPN's coverage in their other studio show where we saw Malika Andrews and I think Monica McNutt a little bit as well. They did a great job. So yeah, I think just really fans are excited about the WNBA and they're eager to learn more. I think for a lot of WNBA fans, you get drawn in by certain names and players, maybe. But so for their willingness to then stay and that again, that willingness to get informed, I think is really crucial to having an educated fan base.
I mean, at this point, who doesn't want to watch the WNBA? Obviously, we're huge fans of it. I'm just glad everybody is hopping on the train at this point. But after this, we are going to talk about some of our WNBA hot takes, which coincides with what we were just talking about. But I won't spoil that now. We'll get into it right after this.
The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started.
Okay, so we wanted to switch things up a little bit today and do a little bit of a hot take, just because I think that this goes along very well with we're seeing record-breaking viewership throughout the WNBA season. Those direct numbers haven't come out just yet, but as Sophia and I were talking about prior, there were some stats saying that, this season has been one of the most watched seasons. As of right now, we only have the direct numbers for the finals and what those looked like, and obviously more record-breaking numbers. This led me to discuss what it looks like to be the face of the league and how that can, to an extent, be a subjective topic. Because in a lot of the articles that I was reading when it came down to, giving these players credit for having this on-court performance that, drew people in, people rallying behind certain players and certain teams all season long, and then obviously having the most viewership within the finals, or at least in these postseason run. A lot of the articles mentioned what it would have looked like if Caitlin Clark was in these runs. Obviously, tore her groin this season and was out for a majority of the season. My point was, we all understand that Caitlin Clark put a lot of eyes on this game. Everybody understands that. Nobody can deny that. And that has been since college. When Kathy Engelbert said, oh, she should be happy that she's getting paid $60 million off, she was going to get paid regardless. She was that girl coming out of college. She is just one of those players that you want to tune in and watch. NBA players are rooting for her. Everyone's rooting for her. However, does that necessarily equate to her being the face of the league? And does that mean that you have to constantly bring her up in conversations when the Aces are the one that won the WNBA finals? And that was because of A'ja Wilson, who not even arguably, she is the face of the league. She is the most dominant player within the WNBA. So, Sophia, I'm curious to hear your perspective on this too, just because I felt like I saw a lot of Caitlin Clark comments within some of the articles that we were reading. Is it, in your opinion, subjective on who the face of the league can be, besides obviously, an A'ja Wilson, but to others, maybe certain demographics, certain regions, who do they perceive their player to tune in to be? I feel like that can maybe be subjective.
Yeah, I 100% think also and agree that it's subjective. And when I think of face of the league, it's on and off court, quite frankly. I mean, you just using a player like A'ja Wilson, for example, on the court, so dominant, best player in the league, getting into that conversation of best WM player of all time. And then you look at off the court, she's an extremely personable individual. I mean, she has her own shoe that gets a lot of hype. She's in a very publicized relationship with an NBA player, Bam Adebayo, and just again that personality. She's showing up to exit interviews in her auntie wig, just having a ball.
A good
And
old
so
time.
a good old time. But it kind of comes down to who the media, I guess, selects as like the face of the league, and then the consumers willingness to accept that. And that's where some of the subjectivity lies within that space. Because for a player like Caitlin Clark that is getting pushed out by the media a lot of it is well deserved. She is an extremely talented player, and she's someone that when you actually watch her on the floor, it's very fun to watch. But it's at that same time, because she was injured for so much of this year, she was a little bit more removed from the eyes of the traditional WNBA audience. And now that's where we see a lot of A'ja. We saw a lot of Nafisa Collier this year as well. But I think that those numbers that we went over in the last segment with the record WNBA viewership, A'ja Wilson was in that finals. And of course, there are a lot of other players that are very notable that people want to watch as well. But for her, I guess, championship, I think it's reasonable. I mean, obviously it's a team Aces championship, but she kind of helped to really win it for them, finals MVP and all. For that to be the second most watched finals in history, and for that to be a sweep as well, I think that can't be understated, because everyone's going to tune in for a back and forth, every single possession matters series. But to witness a sweep is a different level of dominance in the ratings. And I think A'ja just really held her own. She was in those some of those post game on court interviews with Holly. She was being herself, making jokes that went viral and stuff. But yeah, so I think, just going to your point, I think it's definitely subjective, but at the end of the day, I think to have options is a luxury.
I agree with you. And I think that the ability for people to rally behind multiple players within the WNBA also shows the growth of the league, and that there are a multitude of incredibly talented women that are playing this sport, and not only young girls look up to, but young boys. I mean, my little brother went to the Sky games this season, and he was so excited. He hadn't really experienced it prior to that. Obviously, he watches a lot of men's basketball. He had such a good time, and just being able to see what they look like up close in person. He was like, these are fantastic basketball players. He's 13 years old. But it's when we're thinking of, that Asia Wilson, Nafisa Collier, Caitlin Clark. I mean, some would dare say Angel Reese, if you're talking about polarizing players that are drawing attention, whether that at times may be positive or negative to the league, you could still credit them to bringing attention to the WNBA as a whole. To me, Asia Wilson is going to be, and she is, the face of the league, but it also, to an extent, comes down to seniority and veterans as well. Nafisa Collier, when I had spoke to her earlier this season when they were coming to play the Sky, she said, I am the face of the league right now. Angel Reese is the future face of the league. I think a lot of this, I think people are, and we were juxtaposing this to say like the NBA. The face of the league, when you think of NBA, it's LeBron. Everybody glazes LeBron bad. But LeBron James
real bad for real.
Bad. But LeBron, they have songs glazing LeBron. But LeBron James is the king. Like, he is basketball. Like, he is the face of basketball. There is no question around that. However, people are also thinking of the next faces of the league. They wanted it to be Ja Morant. He unfortunately is no longer that. Now you think of your comparison of like maybe a SGA and Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is much more of a polarizing young player. He says whatever he wants. He'll cuss, but he's always going to be himself at the end of the day. SJ is also himself, but he's more just like a regular dude, if that makes sense. Like, and I feel like a lot of that kind of goes to Asia Wilson and Caitlin Clark. Asia is the face, but Caitlin, to me, can be the future, but she also is a face to an extent because of all the eyes that she has brought attention to the WNBA. But Caitlin is also much more polarizing than Asia is. People have a lot more to say about Caitlin, the fan base that she draws, obviously just her style of play in general. And you can argue the same for Asia, but it looks different. They're two different conversations while also in the same conversation, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And again, it's kind of just like who the media really decides to push out. Because in a situation where, say, if you're from New York, people might think that Breanna Stewart is the face of the league. She has her whole campaign, Stu York. I think that's a little
Right.
difficult to see past, kind
She's
of.
also
So
from
again,
New York. She's from upstate.
exactly.
People are going to rally behind that.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where it's really just targeting like demographics and like region, and where do you really see a player having the most impact. And for someone like an Asia Wilson, where Las Vegas isn't necessarily a home media market because it's a tourist destination. No one, I feel like it wasn't until recently I actually started meeting people that say they're from Vegas. Like, what do you mean you live there? You know?
Right.
But it's stuff
It's
like
like when I
that.
found out you were from Miami, I was like, oh, I forget people live there.
Exactly. Exactly. Whereas a player like Caitlin Clark, who's in Indiana, she's already from the Midwest. The Midwest has a very large basketball fan base. It kind of just, those dominoes tend to fall a little bit more. Again, which just goes back to our whole conversation of everything being subjective.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I mean, I was speaking with you about this earlier. I have a lot of people that come up to me within, obviously, well, not obviously, not everybody knows this. I live in Chicago, but I would hope they know if I'm saying I'm the sideline reporter for the Chicago Sky. But a lot of people come up to me, and aside just from, Caitlin Clark remarks or questions about her, and, obviously she is a very big draw for many people, and it is the reason a lot of people started watching the WNBA, and ideally had people that started watching her start to love other players on these teams as well. But a big aspect of that is also Angel Reese. Angel Reese is plastered literally everywhere here. She had, she just came out with her new shoe. There's a lot of reasons for people to be fans of different players within this league, and a lot of it, again, is subjective. It can come down to regional things, but we can go on a whole tangent about this for quite some time. But again, thank you all for tuning in to Locked On Women's Basketball. We will see you again tomorrow. Make sure that you're keeping up with us. Follow Sophia and I on our social media handles, and we will be back. Thank you for tuning in.